Joseph,
How you doing?
I am awesome. Couldn't be better.
Good.
I got my favorite T-shirt on today that I just got the other day, so I'm all ready to rock and roll.
I just noticed that. Where's that from?
I did some training down in Virginia for a company called the Lester Group, and the president there is just an awesome guy. And then the second day of training, he showed up with a box of these T-shirts, and he just handed them out to everybody. So it was pretty cool. So
I've always been trying to figure out what's a good T-shirt for selling. Obviously, it's very simple if you just put sales on a T-shirt.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then I did a TikTok wearing the T-shirt this morning because it's like it reminded me of like sales is, yeah, you want to sell, but the mindset of selling takes on a whole different, like you got all kinds of different ways to attack that. And especially in the in-home world, I'm like, your mindset in selling has to be that you're running this like your own business. So I kind of did a TikTok on that as well. So
that's a good, kind of a great lead in, right?
Yeah.
So what I always like talking to you about it. Obviously, you sold in the home for a long time, so you've experienced that wrath, if you will. What are you seeing? Because you work with a lot of companies, so that's why I always like to have you on too, because you got your ear to the ground.
Yep.
What are you seeing? What are you seeing as most prevalent or the biggest challenge on the sales side right now? Or I guess maybe what are companies asking you to come work with their teams on, if you don't mind sharing, just high level?
Never mind sharing. And I got to tell you what I've been seeing quite a bit of. I think it's really twofold as I was thinking of the answer to your question. One, I think sales leadership is still lacking across the board because for a couple reasons. I think you got some really good sales leaders out there, but I also think I've seen sales leaders that are kind of stuck in the 90s and they're still trying to train the old ways of doing things. And what I've seen is, especially now, the younger homeowners or the younger generations are becoming homeowners. They don't want a sales pitch, man. You show up in that house and you're a salesperson, they're going to kick your ass right out. They're going to shut you down and kick you out. You cannot sound like a salesperson anymore. You just can't. You used to get away with in the old days when the older homeowner was used to that. That's what they were expecting. But man, you show up now and you have anything that sounds like a sales pitch, you're not selling that job. And that's becoming more and more prevalent. And here's a great statistic, Joe, that I saw, and I used this and I did a keynote in Atlantic City a couple of weeks ago. This blew me away, and I kind of knew it was happening there, but I think UCLA did a study. 59% of consumers now will spend more money, not on a better product, but on a better experience. People are buying money, they're spending their money now on the experience with you and your company rather than how good the product is. And if that doesn't wake you up and say, you better fix your stuff, nothing will. Because people are just saying, I don't care how good your product is. If I don't have a good experience with you, I'm not buying it.
And when you say, this is funny, you're bringing this up, not funny, I should say, but like a lot of people will go, oh yeah, our customer experience, but we're talking about the buying experience. It all starts there.
Buying experience, like when I say, what's your customer experience? People always go, oh, well, after the sale, we do this on the install. We do it. No, what's the experience with when you're sitting in the house? And here's the phrase I always use. What's the experience you leave that customer with, whether they buy from you or not? You know what? If they don't buy from you, that experience almost is more important than the experience of if they buy from you. Because if they bought from you, then obviously they had somewhat of a good experience. But if they didn't buy from you, here's the question. Are they still going to refer you? Or did you leave them with a shitty experience? Did you leave them with, oh, another typical sales guy, typical window company, typical roofing company, blah, blah, blah. And now you get a 2-star review because you put high pressure on them and you did all this objection handling crap that they're always training, instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to give you a great experience whether you buy from me or not. And that's what really matters today.
Why is this still a challenge for so many people?
Because there's so much bad sales training out there, to be honest with you. There's so much stuff. And I do research more than that's what I love to do research. I love to see what's happening.
That's what I appreciate about you. I'm dead serious. Every time we talk, it's not just some pie in the sky shit. You've done your homework on it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I go on. I still go on ride-alongs, and I look at what these people are listening to, and a lot of the stuff is just not fresh anymore. It's the same old stuff. And just like, even in the chat today, in your home, in your Facebook group,
Yeah.
one guy asked, how do I handle this objection? And it's like, that's not the right mindset. If you're getting an objection in the first place, you screwed up along the way. The easiest way to handle objections is to not get them. If you're getting objections and then you're focusing on how to handle them, you're already done. It's over. You're swimming uphill. And the mindset has to be, I got to give the customer a great experience so I don't have any objections. Yeah. And it's easier said than done, but there's ways to do that during the conversation, because it's no longer a sales pitch. It's a customer conversation that you're trying to have with these people. And if they feel like it's a pitch, and here's another study I saw, Joe, this was fascinating. They took people, different ages, different generations, and they put the electrodes on their head so you can see the colors of the brain reacting to stuff. So they would ask people general questions, calm questions like, what's your name, what's your birthday, blah, blah, blah. And the color of the brain would stay like blue and green, like very calm colors. And then they asked a sales question, like something like, is this the kind of window you'd like to see in your home? Like something stupid like that. It was fascinating, Joe. The brain lit up red, like immediately block. That's a sales question, and they're going to shut you down. And that's what's happening today. People are, as soon as they feel like you're going to give them a sales pitch, you're done. People need to feel like you are there to give them a great experience, whether they buy or not. And if you do that, chances are they will buy more than they won't.
The other side of that is, so I guess the question then becomes, which if let's say I play the rep here, is how do I do that? How do I do the things that we're talking about doing and get rid of some of the old mentality of close.
Yeah.
Right? How do I actually, I'm almost answering it, which is bad, but at the end of the day, this is where detachment comes in.
Go ahead.
Right? Or let's say I preach a lot, probably what people like to say I preach, but process over outcome.
Yep.
Right? I don't let the opponent, i.e. customer, I don't mean it in a bad way, opponent, but like it's in football, I don't let the opponent determine my level of effort.
Right.
Right. So if I'm playing the Little Sisters of the Poor one weekend, I'm going to beat them like a drum, if that's so be the case, because if I shortcut it, as our good friend in the group, Brian Gottlieb, says, you perfect what you practice, or I'm sorry, you make permanent what you practice.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I see, and you can tell me, and I'm kind of answering, like I said, my own question. I don't mean it, but I see so many guys that are just so glued and racing to the close.
They're not only racing to the close, and I call it selling too fast. It's like one of the biggest things that reps struggle with is as soon as they hear the problem, they need to sell right away. But here, I'm going to give you a quick story that I use in training, because to answer your question, there's quite a few different answers to that question. What can a rep do? None of anything, any way I would answer that question is not rocket science. Sales is not rocket science. It really isn't. But you have to do certain things. Like, for example, ask open-ended questions. Duh. Like, you think, oh my God, that's a big revelation. It's not, but it's amazing how many sales reps don't ask open-ended questions, or they don't ask enough questions, or they sell too fast, or they present price wrong, all these different things. But let me give you a quick example on how that would work. So let's say you're a roofing salesman, right? Yes. And you go in, you're a typical salesman, and you meet the gentleman, and he says, the roof in my garage is leaking. Typical salesman, great. Let me show you my shingles. I've got 3-tab. I've got architectural. They come in 17 different colors. I use GAF. I use Certainteed, blah, 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 and you're selling immediately, okay? You're a typical roofing salesman. Let's become the better roofing salesman, the salesman that's going to sell more, because he's going to do this. Hey, Mr. Smith, how can I help you? Well, the roof in my garage is leaking. Really? Tell me more about that. Well, it's been leaking for 3 years. Wow. How's that affected your life? I just asked 2 open-ended questions. Ready for this? Well, it's been leaking on my wife's Christmas decorations for 3 years. Now you just uncovered the real problem. The fake problem was the leak. The real problem was it's leaking on his wife's Christmas decorations. Wow, Mr. Smith, describe for me how Christmas has been for you for 3 years. Well, I got to tell you, Joe, it's been a rough 3 years. I've been buying new Christmas decorations. Who's the guy buying the roof from now? The first salesman or the second one?
You're nailing the head. You're hitting the nail on the head.
Literally, all I did was ask 3 very simple open-ended questions, and I become the consultant rather than the salesperson and the guy that and the salesperson and the company that guy wants to do business with. And I just asked 3 questions. So that's what I'm saying is like so many reps don't do that. They'll ask logistical questions, like questions to get to the price. What color do you want? You know, how big's your roof? How old's the house? All those logistical questions that don't get any great answers except helping you get to the price. You want to ask open-ended emotional questions that get people to talk about what the problem is, what their pain is, and then that's how you're going to solve it. So a very simple way to eliminate objections is to ask open-ended questions. It can't be any more simpler than that, but it is shocking to me on every ride along I go how many reps don't ask open-ended questions.
You think it's because they're not present?
Yes. So that'll take me to that's a good segue, Joe, to I need to ask. They have a list of questions in their head that they think they need to ask. So they'll ask a question. You as the homeowner are answering the question, but I'm not paying attention as a sales rep because I'm thinking about the next question I'm going to ask. So if you ask a question and I spend 2-3 minutes answering it, and then you ask me another completely unrelated question to my answer, guess how I'm feeling as a homeowner?
Yeah.
You're not listening to me. You're not listening to me. You're not understanding me. You're a typical sales guy just here for yourself. And I'm already tuning you out and thinking about when I got to pick up my kids from soccer. You lost me. And here's the third thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned always closing, ABC, always be closing, always be closing. That's so antiquated and outdated, and I hate the term. But here's my ABC. My ABC is not always be closing. My ABC is always be checking. You need to constantly be checking in on the homeowner. How does that sound? What is that like? How does that sound to you? Always look at the body language, see where you're going, and check in on the appointment, because now they're going to feel heard and listened to and understood. And when they feel that, they're going to have a much easier an easier time of saying, you know what, I like this guy. I like this guy. I like the product. I'm going to move forward. But if they don't feel comfortable, if they feel that sales edge, you're just lumped in with everyone else that's coming to the house.
This brings up a good point too about general questions is what's being taught as the reason we ask questions.
I don't think that's being taught at all.
Or maybe I'm saying it wrong, right? Or what's the reason? So, hey, you're right. Maybe that's true. Never mind. Sorry. That's the fundamental. Maybe it's not even being taught, but if it is being taught, it's being told, hey, the old adage of you got to, load up your gun with their answers and then use it against them in the close. And it's like, no wonder they don't respond. They can tell
right.
It's a leading question.
Right. And as soon as you make the customer the opponent, like you said before, but I knew what you meant, or the adversary, and that you need to conquer them, and that's why I don't like the word close, to close them, they're going to feel that now. The days of the homeowner knowing and expecting that kind of sales pitch are over. They don't want that anymore, and they just don't. They're prepared. They have done their research, and don't even be naive. Like I've talked to reps. Well, they're in their 70s. They're not online. Well, you know what? Their kids are, or their grandkids are. If you think that they haven't checked you out and looked at the reviews before you got in the house, you're just a naive salesperson. They've got a lot of information on you, and all they're trying to do is they want to like you. They want to find the person they like the most. Because let's face it, with all the technology now, all the windows are good, all the roofing materials are good, all the siding is good. It's not in the olden days where you had a piece of shit window and you had a great window. Everything is pretty much, everybody has a lifetime warranty. Everybody has double, triple pane glass. Everybody does this, everybody does that. When you're to sell against the product now, you're missing the point. They know the product is good. They know what product they want. They want to buy you and the company. and really you. And that's what they're looking for. The other stuff is secondary to today's buyer. It really is.
Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, with just general manufacturing specs and things like that, I mean, I can't imagine there's too many companies out there that are even offering something that isn't of quality compared. I mean, obviously there's ways to lead a perception of one having more quality than the other, but which is also another good point, is the demonstration itself can make, but that's again, the individual rep who ties their demonstration back to what they discovered and the real reason, the real thing that we're trying to solve.
Yeah. I mean, if you're in the house and you're hooking your horse to showing that your product is better than another product, and that's how you're selling, you're just not going to sell that much. You're just not. They're looking at, if you know that this customer is not a tire kicker and they want something quality, trust me, they've seen and they've looked at all the other quality stuff. So they're going to look at, it's going to come down to emotion. How's it going to look in or on my house? Am I going to like it? And am I going to like doing business with you? If you come across as a genuine human being that wants to help me make my house look better, wants to help me make my house warmer with nicer windows, I'm going to be much more apt to choose you to do that, because I know that the Pella window is just as good as the Renewal window, is just as good as the Marvin window, is just as good as the Okno window, whatever it is, fill in the blank. If I want that level of window, now my choice is not really the product, it's you and what the product looks like. And I think another area where reps fall woefully short is visually showing the customer what it's going to look like. Sales is emotional. People buy on emotion. And if when you talk about siding and roofing and even windows, what's that going to look like? If you're not showing people now with the technology that's out there what the product is going to look like on their house, if you're not putting them in the position of feeling of what it's like to feel like to own that product, you're missing the boat. That's what's going to help you sell. Not, well, we've got a 25-year warranty and triple pane glass and 16 levels of weather stripping, and the company's been in business for 125 years, started by my Uncle Jack in a red barn. Nobody gives a shit about that.
Well, I can speak to that being true. My wife and I have delayed and delayed and delayed. We have an all red brick home, and we got enticed to, or excited because we saw somebody paint theirs white, but we still couldn't. We kept delaying because we couldn't visualize it. Well, the guy who got our business was the guy who showed us to a T what exactly it was going to look like white.
There you go.
And then all the windows now black and all the, he was able to show us everything. It's scary how spot on that was. The other thing that you said earlier to tie back to is that I think is important is if I'm demoing that roof and I'm able to tie back to the lady whose Christmas ornaments are getting destroyed from the leaking, to make sure that we're on the same page for a solution, that's probably more powerful than just talking about a shingle.
That's literally why the roofer is there, because if it's in the guy's garage, probably not a big priority to fix the leak. But if it's leaking where the only place he can put the Christmas decorations and it's ruining them, that's the impetus of him having the roofing company out there. That's what you got to focus on. Then when he realizes that you care about that like he does, then you can choose the shingles. But the shingles shouldn't be brought up until you find out what the real problem is. Because half the time, more than half the time, I mean, almost all the time, there's the fake problem and then there's the real problem. The fake problem is my energy bills are high, my windows are 50 years old, but what's the real problem? The real problem is I got a draft on the back of my neck when I'm watching Family Feud every night. That's the real problem. How do I take care of that draft? Well, let me show you my window. But let's talk about the draft first. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. That's what drives it drives the deal, man. When my daughter was born and we have 2 heat zones in our house, and the one where her bedroom was, causing her to wake up in the middle of the night sweating bullets.
Yeah.
And I had no problems writing that check to get the new HVAC done. To see her wake up in the middle of the night, obviously it's my only child, but it was my first child. You'll do anything for your children. But it's the guy who came in who I knew was like, we can't have her waking up in the middle of the night sweating.
There you go. Exactly.
You don't want that as a parent. And I'm like, damn, you're good. I mean, it's right on.
Well, let's use that as an example. He comes in and you say, my daughter's waking up in the middle of the night sweating. He could have said, great, let me show you the new HVAC unit I have. And it's made by this company, and it does this, and it has all these BTUs. Or he could have said, wow, how's that been for your daughter? Well, that's really been shitty. How's that been for you as parents? Oh my, I just asked 2 questions and you're like, I love this guy, right?
Oh, he did it indirectly because he found out, one, that I couldn't stand to see my daughter suffer. That's just natural. Yeah. Talk about pulling on that string. But then he said, I'll never forget. He goes, are you getting up is this causing you to get up in the middle of the night then? Oof. I was like, well, yeah, I had to go. Yeah. And he's like, that probably sucks.
Yeah. There you go.
Damn it.
Let me get the checkbook.
Yeah. He's like, so the solution really was about then her not suffering and me sleeping through the night.
Yep. Yeah. And that was the real problem. And, the real problem is not that you have a crappy HVAC system. The real problem was what you just said. Yeah. And that's what reps miss. The reps think about the real problem is I want to get new windows because my windows are old, or I need a new HVAC system, or we need a new bathroom. You talk about jacuzzi. You need a new bathroom because it's old. Well, maybe you need a new bathroom let's find out why you really want a new bathroom. It's usually not because it's old. There's something else going on in there. You got to find out that real problem by asking open-ended questions. And then you literally will separate yourself from everyone else. I get this question a lot, Joe. How do I build value and differentiate myself from the competition? I say it's very simple. You ask open-ended questions. If you ask open-ended questions and no one else does, you just differentiated yourself just by doing that. That's all you need to do.
Speaking of science on this is why they say, I don't know that don't hold me to the stat. I'm not, but it is, you can probably Google it, but I saw something at one point that like 37% of all prescriptions don't ever get filled. So medical. And then they dug in because everybody naturally at first was like, oh, that's because of the cost of, Medicare, Medicaid, all that stuff. And then they dug in and said, why didn't you fill it? And it's because the patient never felt that the product, that the doctor understood what they were, what the root cause of the problem was. So they didn't buy into the solution, the prescription.
Wow.
Yes. So then I went further back. I went down a rabbit hole on this with another gentleman who's been on here. Dr. Harold Chernitsky's been on Windshield Time with us before. I asked him, I said, why is that the case? Why do they not take a medical doctor is at one point probably the most trusted, I don't want to speak to it today, but most trusted out of anybody profession. And yet you have this high amount of people that aren't following the protocol and filling the prescription. And he said, I'll tell you exactly what we did a study on this. He was telling me this, the average patient comes into the doctor with anywhere from 10 to 15 questions. Like hey, I got to remember to ask them this, and then they get through their third question before the doctor is taken over, cut them off, and begins the prescription on average. Wow. So they have 10 to 15 questions they want answered, and the doctor automatically judges by the third question. They said on average, it was like 3.4 questions in, the doctor already begins to diagnose.
So that's so fascinating because we would at one point we were like, well, doctors are the best salespeople because they ask the best questions. Now that's not happening anymore either.
Well, so then I said, okay, well, what's causing that? And in this case, he said, well, it's different for every practice. But if you look at it, which I've experienced now, if you look at most of these practices, they are on such tight timelines to see as many patients as possible. And I'm not trying to go down this path but it's like, okay, that makes sense. And then same thing here. It could be in the home. We're so focused on the result that we shortcut and do the things that we need to do to even have a shot at the result.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why when you focus on what's going to be my my closing technique and how am I going to handle these objections, you're focusing on the wrong things. You're setting yourself up for objections. You're setting yourself up. Here's another phrase that I hate when I hear reps say this. When I got to the close, like the close is a destination. The close is not a closet door that you have to open and walk into. The close is not a destination. The close is simply the culmination of a great conversation. The close shouldn't be this thing that's sitting out there all the time. The close is just the end of the conversation. Let's get started. Let's get you on the count, however you want to ask it.
Yeah.
But when people say, well, I got to the close, if you're thinking of the close as a destination, a part of this whole process, you're going to be a very mediocre salesperson.
Yeah, I like to go down the path of let's facilitate a decision.
Yeah,
because that's all we're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And
you want them to be comfortable. The customer, the homeowner, they're not going to do business with you unless they're comfortable with you and with the price. And it's not rocket science to do that. You do proper price preparation. You have a price presentation that you do. You alleviate the buyer anxiety with certain things that I talk about. But when you do those things and the customer is really comfortable, you have to remember, customers that need your product still don't want to meet with you. They do not want to meet with a salesperson. They do not want to meet with a contractor, despite them needing the product. They are expecting a terrible experience. That's what they're expecting. So if you validate that terrible experience that they're expecting, if you actually become the terrible experience, they'll be like, yep, he's just a typical sales guy that we were expecting. They're not buying from you. But if you become what I call the anti-salesperson, the salesperson that they're not expecting, that actually asks good questions and doesn't seem selfish and doesn't do high pressure and makes it conversational, it's much easier to sell when you're the salesperson or the contractor that they're not expecting.
So that brings up another good point that I think, or makes me think of something. So if that's what they're expecting, then your leash is really small before confirmation bias kicks in.
Yep, absolutely. And there's also, like, now, Tony Hody.
Yeah, he'll be on in a couple weeks.
Okay, cool. So great guy. He talks about a word. I think it's called what word does he use? It's not preconditioning, but it's basically, he talks about the importance now of not only just setting the appointment and saying, hey, Joe will be there at 2:00 on Wednesday afternoon. It's about starting the experience before the appointment even happens. Sending good information, sending reviews, sending pictures, getting the customer excited about stuff like that. So it's like a preconditioning kind of thing before the customer even starts. But when you walk in that house and they're judging you immediately. They're judging you when you come out of the car. They're watching you walk up to the front door most of the time, and they're judging you. And if you confirm that judgment, if you confirm that this is the asshole salesperson that I was expecting, you're just not going to sell. But if all of a sudden you're not that person, it's like a breath of fresh air. We've all experienced it. We've all experienced the salesperson that wasn't what we were expecting. Like car salesman is a great example. The majority of anyone alive hates going to a car dealership, but at some point we've probably met a good car salesman that actually we liked. And once we do that, we remember the feeling. We're like, oh my God, I want to refer this guy everywhere because he's not the typical sales guy. Or we meet a car mechanic who didn't rip us off. Or we meet, all of these professions that we're expecting bad experiences. When we don't get it, because it's the exception, not the rule. When we meet the exception, we want to refer the exception because we love the experience because it's all emotional. That's what you have to do as a salesperson.
Wow. It's funny you say that. I called the other night. My wife says, hey, we need to plan out tonight with our daughter. You make the plans. I said, okay. So I don't know what to do. Right. But I'll never forget. So it caught me off guard. I called the local bowling alley because I just wanted to make sure that there was not like a league night only type thing. Right. And so I just wanted to, and to what you're saying, I got off the phone and I told my wife, I said, I don't I don't speak to very many bowling alley attendants or employees, but that has got to be the nicest guy I've ever spoke to. I mean, what I'm getting at is it catches you off guard. You're so used to the norm these days that when you see it and experience it, to the point we went to the bowling alley and I found the guy that it was 100%. It was him. Mm-hmm. It's a family-owned thing, but I was like, and I went and told him, I said, hey, man, I called a little while ago, and he's almost ready for me to be like mad at him about something. I was like, I called a little while ago before he came about asking about, this, that, or the other. I was like, hey, man, I just really want to appreciate your time. Because he's like, hey, here's what happens. We have lanes open now, but here's the waiting list. And usually it happens. I mean, he went through the whole thing off of one question.
Yeah. And it's just amazing that in customer service and customer experiences, when we experience something that's not the norm like that, and it's unfortunate because the norm is not good customer service or good customer. That's not the norm. The norm, that's the exception. So when we experience it, it's like it's just a breath of fresh air. Like, this is amazing. And I'll give you a quick story. I just experienced bad customer service. And it was kind of absurd to me. And I just thought about it. Like, I stayed the other night. I did some training up in Massachusetts. So I stayed the night before in a hotel. I guess will remain nameless, but I've stayed there before. But they're supposed to have breakfast in the morning. And my training didn't start until 11. So I was like, oh, so I kind of slept in a little bit. I got up at 7:45, whatever, 8 o'clock. I did some work. I went downstairs at 9:05 to have breakfast. Not 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 9:05. The doors to the breakfast place were closed. So I'm like, what's going on? So I see this lady, the manager person. I said, where's the breakfast? It was, oh, no, we closed the doors at 9 o'clock. I said, you stopped breakfast at 9 o'clock? Really? She says, yeah. I said, all right, well, where can I get the coffee? You know, coffee stops at 9 o'clock too. And I said, you don't serve coffee after 9 o'clock in a hotel? She goes, oh yeah, we close, the urns are gone. We wash them out 9:15. We're done. I was blown away. I said, so I can't get a cup of coffee in your hotel room now at 9:06 a.m. She's like, no, you can't. So it's, minor thing, but you think I'm going back to that hotel? No. Yeah. It was amazing. And she was like, yeah, sorry, too bad. It just blew me away. So little things, it's always little things. Sales never is about a big thing. Customer service is never about a big thing. It's always the little things that matter. People appreciate the little tiny things that you do, like answering the phone and being nice. It's not hard, but it's so rare that when it happens, you're like, wow, this was great.
So do you think that it stems from the expectation and the hiring? Like, these companies, we hire the wrong people under the wrong expectation. Like, how do you get buy-in with a big entire sales team around this? Because again, it's very prevalent. Sell in the home, or you sell in general. I mean, hence why there's so many. The negative perception of salespeople is so deep in people's lives that how do we change it? Who's doing it? Who can do it at scale? That's what I want to see. Like, it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's folks like you and me going out there. I like to say, changing the world of sales one team at a time. It comes back to the leadership. And I have been seeing really good leaders, emerging, some of the younger guys that are now becoming leaders, and they want to be leaders. And like, one of the biggest mistakes, and this is not uncommon, but many companies will take the top sales rep and turn them into a manager, and they have no leadership qualities whatsoever, but they're great salespeople. That's a huge mistake that companies make. But I've been seeing over the last few years that there's some really good new young people that are coming in that are really focusing on the customer experience. I'm getting more and more requests for training about the customer experience than actual sales techniques, to be honest. I mean, I'll even give Pella a shout out. Pella hired me, and they are literally, their whole mantra is, what's the experience we're giving our customer right now? And that's what I've been talking about with their sales teams. And yeah, we get into some techniques and strategies of selling, but selling becomes a lot easier when you give the customer a great experience. It just does.
You can obviously you can teach it.
Yeah, you can teach it. You can. The sales is also, everything in life is psychological, but certainly sales is. And when you teach very simple conversational concepts and not how to not use negative words and how to just, make people feel comfortable with some of the words you use, it's not that hard. It just takes a little practice to do it. So, for example, I'll give you a great example of, I do a whole training on eliminating negative words and using proper, I call them magic phrases. So let's go to a bathroom remodeling situation. Let's say you're a bathroom remodeler and the couple is there and they're remodeling the bathroom and they have one sink, right? And they're like freaking out. They're like, they get a little nervous about the price. They have one sink. Most reps would be afraid to say, why don't you add a second sink? Because obviously 2 sinks, if you have a couple or a family, is better than 1 sink. But now most reps that I've seen would not bring that up. I got a sale. I got this nailed. I don't want to bring anything else up to mess it up. And they'll go with that way. And you have a customer that, yeah, they might be happy with the job, but they're not thrilled because you didn't bring up something that would help them. So instead of saying, hey, why don't we add a second sink here? Because now the customer automatically will say, well, I'm already spending, psychologically, they go, well, I'm already spending 50 grand. I'm not going to add another sink. Instead, you say, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, how open-minded would you be for adding a second sink here? Because it'll eliminate people brushing their teeth over each other in the morning. That phrase of how open-minded would you be makes the customer automatically think, well, I'm open-minded about that. Of course I'm open-minded. Or another phrase, I'm not sure this is for you, but would you consider a second sink here? And then you go, because, and you give the reason. When you say, I'm not sure it's for you, the brain automatically says, wait a minute, that might be for me. It just happens automatically. And now you don't become, you become the salesperson that's not upselling. You become the consultant that's helping. And when you say, how open-minded are you? Or, I'm not sure this is for you. They then will buy that second sink and think you help them rather than upsell them. That's something very, very simple, but it changes the experience completely. And now you've got a customer who's thrilled with their new bathroom and they're thrilled with you because you consulted on it rather than sold them.
It's funny you talk about magic words and that the language is so powerful, meaning how you say something is just, I see it often with, and you probably have it in yours. I don't know where, I probably read about it somewhere, but it's so powerful when you're getting ready to maybe demonstrate something of, your product, your service, your company, whatever, is to lead in with, because you said this, I would recommend this.
Mm-hmm.
Just adding that pre-phrase of, again, because you said this, I would recommend this, or this is what exactly this is for, and tie it back to what they said.
Right. And what you're doing there, the word because is really one of the most powerful words in the English language because anything you say after it justifies what you said in the beginning, even if it's nonsensical. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I want to tell you, this is one of my favorite studies of all time, and it's on the word because. It was a woman, a professor in Harvard in 1975 who wanted to study the power of the word because. So what she did was, back then, for those who remember college campuses back then, they had what they call copy centers. You'd walk into a giant room and there were a bunch of copy machines in the perimeter, and people would go up with their dimes in their pocket and they would make copies of their homework. So what she did was she had a couple of volunteers, and the first volunteer went up, and I don't know how many, she did it, I think she did it 100 times. She went up to the front of the line and she made sure the line was 10 or 15 people deep. And she would say, excuse me, can I get in front of you? That was it. So out of the 100 times, 98 people said no. So 2 people said, sure, you can get in front of me. Ready for this? She then sent the same person up to the first person in line with a bunch of people behind. And she said, excuse me, can I get in front of you because I need to make copies? Now everyone's online to make copies, but she said the word because I have to make copies. Ready for this? 94 out of 100 people said yes. So the word because, even whatever you say after it could be nonsensical, it gets people to buy into what you're saying and actually accept what you're saying. And when you say, put a second sink here because, it makes people, it justifies the reason to say yes. So what you just said, how about we take a look at this because you said you liked it? They're not going to say no. You just justified why you're showing it.
You said a word earlier that's very similar to because. You said it with, you're talking about might be good for you. I don't know. I'm not sure if this is, but this might be an option for you. Might is another one of those.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure it's for you is a great opening sentence to introduce something without feeling like you're upselling. Because when you say, I'm not sure it's for you, people automatically want to hear about it. I'm not sure it's for you, but we have a 50-year shingle rather than a 25-year shingle. And you have a really nice house here. So I'm not sure it's for you, but we have a 50-year shingle, and I'd like to show you that because I think that would protect your house, whatever you want to say. But
yeah,
when you want to introduce something, but reps get afraid of that because they're like, oh, they're upselling and I've already got them sold on this. Just say, I'm not sure it's for you, but I have this.
Have you ever studied anything like in your studies? Have you ever looked into motivational interviewing?
Motivational interviewing. What does that mean?
So I'm going to botch it, but what it really stems from, it's a form of therapy is where it came from.
Okay.
But if you, and again, I could probably look it up to know exactly and say it the right way, but the concept is obviously, or I want to say the psychologist who developed it in the 60s, Pascal, I think was his name, was like, people do things for their reasons, not yours. And
right.
So the concept is, and this is where it becomes why it was so prevalent, is you have all these people that were in need of, whether they were alcoholics, addicts, that's probably where it started, was therapy for them, is people weren't recovering, or they would constantly, fall out or, have issues and kind of not sustain the recovery. And what they found is because most therapists were, you got to do like they were doing, interventions, right? You can't do this, cocaine's going to kill you kind of thing, right? Well, of course, we know, and they still wouldn't do it, right? It's not healthy, but you can't stop, right? And the reason they were discovering was that it's because they're not doing it for their reasons. So the concept of the motivational interviewing, which I'm not a fan of I just rather call it MI. So that way people don't, because they think, but the concept is you have to evoke. So you ask questions that will evoke their reasons for making the change. Right. So in the questions, they have a really cool acronym, desire, ability, reason, and need. So you ask questions that are around desire to change, ability to change, reason for changing, and need to change. But it's their answers. And it's the concept we were saying earlier of like, if I tell you what's wrong with your home is not nearly as powerful as you telling yourself what's wrong.
Exactly, right.
Right. So naturally, if I go out and I look at a roof and I see crap streaming down the side of it, mold and all this, and I go, oh man, mold, blah, blah. But if I ask them, hey, what do you think causes that?
Yeah.
And they actually do maybe know, right? And maybe roof's a bad thing, but I don't know. But it's really cool because in the home, if I look at a customer and they're telling me about their drafts, like we'll use that example you did, and I say, hey, what do you think's causing that?
Mm-hmm.
Now, people would say, oh, but I'm the expert. I need to tell them. No, you don't. Especially in today's day and age where people are very well versed. I'd rather know how much they know. Mm-hmm. Because there's nothing worse than if I say something that contradicts something that they know.
Right.
But the real reason is because it's not that old. Oh, if they say it's true, if I say no, it's because they need to hear themselves.
Yes.
The answers. So there's a stage is because people are, the whole thing is people are ambivalent, right? They know they want to fix it, but they know that, they're in the middle. And I evoke through questioning in motivational interviewing their reasons for changing. Mm-hmm. It's a really cool, again, it's primarily known in therapy.
Right.
But I mean, you're seeing it. I'm seeing it go into, people are writing books on it now with, like, it works in leadership, right? I can tell it. Back in the day, you could just be the dictator and tell the employee to do something.
Right.
But in our world, I think it works. I use it in coaching, right? I can tell a rep till I'm blue in the face, hey man, you got to stop doing that. And then they just continue to do it. And you're like, why? Because I've got to get them to understand and have their desire, their ability, their reasons for making the change, their need for making the change. And everything gets positioned towards them. It's not about me.
Right.
To get buy-in.
And you got to find out if they want to make the change.
Yeah, because otherwise you just beat your head up against the wall.
Right, exactly.
Right? Until someone's belief about it changes. Like if I'm trying to tell a rep, or I'm trying to, or a customer, right? And if they don't buy into doing it, or don't see the value or the reason, again, or and have the ability, I'm talking to a wall.
Yeah, and just because you said it doesn't mean they want it. That's the other thing, is like, people don't always want to buy what you have to sell, and you have to be okay with that. You know, it's like, and people sometimes are not ready to buy when you're ready to sell. You have to be okay with that as well. You know, if you're in a one call close office, which most are, except for the, you know, I think the detailed stuff, you know, the sidings or the bathrooms or things like that. But if you're windows or roofing, you should have a one call close situation, simply because if you do it right, the customer feels very comfortable moving forward, and you asked a lot of good questions. If they're saying, send me a quote or email that to me, how often are you getting that job? Not often.
Not very rare.
Follow up to you blue in the face. The easiest time to sell a customer is when they're excited about everything that's in front of them when they first hear about it. Second you walk out that door, 53% of everything you said is gone. Left, that just flies out of their head. And then you get lumped in with the other 3 contractors that showed up. And now they're just looking at numbers, and you become a commodity.
So gosh, man, you're hitting the nail on the head. And I just had it pulled up. I just wanted to make sure I said it right. Pascal was the psychologist, but he says people are better persuaded by the reasons they themselves discover than those that come into their minds from others.
And that's called motivational interviewing. I'm going to look
motivational interviewing.
Like that.
From the 70s back, I think, is when it started. But I mean, you're seeing more and more. Unfortunate, again, that doctor I mentioned earlier that's been on Windshield Time with us is just a personal friend. He was the one that kind of introduced me to it, because I've just always noticed every time we would talk, he very rarely ever gave me advice. He asked great questions, and by the end of it, you would be like, I just answered my own problem, or I just solved my own by evoking the, you know, is the word they use. But then and then you'll learn about it in there too. It's pretty cool. It's called change talk. And you start getting the customer or the patient to start using statements that reflect their desire to change. And then you know where you're at. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And I think it's a fundamental shift if it's used in sales, because it's got to be used for the right reasons.
Right. And it also sounds like I'd have to do some research on it, but it also sounds like at least open-ended questions is somewhat on the same track. Oh yeah. So it's, the other acronym is for ORS. I think it's open-ended question, affirm, reflective listening, and S is summary. Okay. So I ask an open-ended question, then I affirm them, like, oh, that's really good. That part, you know, if you know, whatever it may be. Like if you're actually coaching a rep, you affirm all the good things that happened. Right. Right. You know, come to think, you actually do that really well, and then reflect on what they say, and then ultimately summarize. So speaking of what you just said, I know we're going off topic here, but you'll love it once you read into it. You're going to go, oh, gee, Lord. Let me bring us back to topic a little bit, because I want to share something with you that I share in my training, and it's the top 8 things. I forget who did this study, but the study was basically, what do consumers, I use the word hate, but what are the top things consumers don't like about salespeople? What are they? So I think it was 10. I did the top 8. So in my keynote, I do the top 8 things people hate about salespeople. And there's the typical ones. Like if you hear that, if I ask you a question, what do you think people hate about salespeople, Joe? What's the number one thing that pops in your head usually?
Manipulation?
Manipulation, high pressure. Those are usually in the top. But when you go through them, it's fascinating. Like lack of follow-up is one, not respecting time is another. There's quite a few there. But you know what the number one is? The number one is not high pressure. I always, when I first saw this study, I'm like, it's got to be high pressure. High pressure is number 2. The number one thing that people hate about salespeople is they don't listen. Now here, this study had over 10,000 consumers. So when I'm talking to a group of people, I'm like, here's 10,000 people telling you what they don't like about you. And the number one thing they're saying to you is you don't listen to them. So you said reflective listening. See, people listen to respond rather than to reflect and actually listen to the answer. So you have to listen to understand rather than listen to respond. That's what I meant to say. Most reps listen to respond, or they just go to the next question without listening at all. But if you actually have good reflective listening and you answer when you hear that question, you hear that answer, and you ask a follow-up question based on that answer, the customer's brain is like, thank God this guy's here. He's listening to me. But when you don't, and you got like, oh, let me get on the checklist and let me see what I have. Let me see the next question I have to ask. You're dead in the water.
My understanding is it's also subconscious, meaning the customer feels it and doesn't even realize. They're like, this is a different experience, meaning they don't, you know what I mean? It happens subconsciously to them. They're like, something different about this guy. They're not able to sit there and go, this guy does reflective listening really well. Like,
no, they just feel better. Yes.
You know what I mean? They feel the feel. But you said there were what, 10,000 customers?
There were 10,000 people in this study. And
it also probably works in marriage.
Yes, I'm sure it does. But this study was over 10,000 consumers, what people don't like about salespeople, and the top 2 are high pressure and they don't listen. And number 4 was salespeople talk too much. So that goes hand in hand with not listening.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what it. I mean, again, I'm guilty. I'm not saying I'm not. It's just trying to understand. I think it's a fundamental shift in what we train salespeople on.
Yeah. I mean, salespeople from the get-go. Well, let's start from just society in general. Have you ever met a 10-year-old that says, I want to be a salesperson when I grow up?
No.
Let's just start there. So sales has such a negative connotation, negative perception. Nobody wants to be a salesperson. You go to companies and you ask people in that company, who are the salespeople? They'll just point to the sales team. What about the customer service people? What about the installation director? You don't think they're salespeople too? I'm not a salesperson. Don't call me a salesperson. Do you talk to customers on a daily basis? Well, yeah. Well, then you're a salesperson. Sorry, you are. But it's like so negative. So then people don't want to get into sales. Then they get into sales and they're like, they have this like, ooh, am I a crappy person because I'm in sales? But now I like sales because I'm making a lot of money, but it's all about me now because I'm making money. Sales needs to be from the beginning. It needs to start with, you're here to help people. And because of that, you'll make money, not the other way around.
And yeah, so it's a completely different, a fundamental shift that has to occur.
Yeah, it does.
And training is night and day different, right? Night and day different. How do you deal with, I mean, I'm just curious, mainly for say there's a sales manager listening to this call who's like, amen. But that they bang their head up against the wall because they've got the reps that still just, you tell them till you're blue in the face. You try to work with them on this, I guess just stay in the fight is the concept for the sales manager. Just keep preaching and teaching. And
it's stay in the fight, but it's also, you can get down to, there's a couple things you can do. Number one, not tooting my own horn, but outside voices are huge. They're powerful.
100%.
Bring in an outside voice, bring in an outside person for a couple of days of training or a keynote or whatever is huge and usually impactful. And you can kind of start cracking that outer shell with that. But the other thing is, you know what? At some point, there's got to be some accountability. And the accountability, and I'll give you an example. When I worked for Renewal by Anderson, when I got there, the top sales rep every year, the rep of the year, was always the person who sold the most. That was it. Sold the most, you were the rep of the year. Didn't matter what your customer reviews were. Didn't matter that you pissed off all these other customers. Or you did high pressure and you had a 49% cancellation rate. Didn't matter. You sold 2.5 million, 3 million. You were the sales rep of the year. But what they realized, to their credit, was we don't want guys that just sell their asses off regardless of anything else. Whatever they leave in their wake doesn't matter because they're selling 3 million a year. We want the sales rep that's going to sell 2.5 million, but get 5-star reviews, that visits his job sites, that gets 3 referrals a month. That's the salesperson that's going to make us successful in the future. And they shifted their entire focus, and they came up with a system that graded sales reps, and volume of sales was just one component of it. Reviews was a second, referrals was a third, self-generated appointments was this. And they had like 10 different criteria that you were graded on. And all of a sudden, the sales rep of the year wasn't the guy that sold the most. The sales rep of the year was the guy that maybe had the 5th highest volume, but had the most referrals and the highest customer satisfaction. They're like, give me 10 of those guys instead of 10 of the guy who sold the most. And that was the shift. They started holding reps accountable to the other parts of the business that would make the business successful, not just selling. And to their credit, it's worked like gangbusters.
It's almost like it's a 360-degree rep.
Yeah, it's the rep that treats their job, like I started this call, like it's their own business. And not a lead baby sitting on the couch waiting for the leads to come in and in between appointments goes home and plays Call of Duty. That's not the rep that people want anymore. You want the rep that who's in between appointments? I'm going to go visit a job site. I'm going to go try to get a referral. I'm going to go hang out at Starbucks with my shirt on and my computer open, meeting people and talking to people and my truck labeled outside. That's the kind of rep that's going to make your company successful. The rep that is treating his job with your company like it's his own business. You get those reps, give me 10 of those reps all day long instead of 20 of the guys that are just sitting around waiting for leads to come in.
Are you seeing more and more companies kind of lean towards the required, level of referrals as part of your? Yeah,
I'm definitely seeing that. I just got hired by a window company in Connecticut to go down in April. Literally all they want me to talk about is self-gens and referrals. They're changing their whole focus because they're tired of reps complaining about not getting enough leads. Like, you know what? If you're going to complain about it, you're going to go find another job. And we're going to find a rep who's going to come in and treat this like it's his own business or her own business.
But it's good that they're hiring you for the train, because if you don't train it, it won't. I mean, you look at what most companies probably on average pay, commission and a half for a self-gen, and we still don't self-gen.
Yeah.
Exactly. The incentives are there, but they still don't do it because either they're not trained on it or, like you said, wrong person.
Yep.
That's
so it comes down to you're 100% right. It comes down to the person. It comes down to them wanting to do it. You want the people that in this business, you want these reps that really care about what they're doing and not just sit around and, oh man, I only have one appointment tomorrow. This company sucks. This industry is full of those people. And, at least though, in the last 5 years, I'm seeing them start to trickle away. So I think by the time I'm 90, we should get there.
Jeez, so deep. Oh man, Allan, it's been a good time, man.
Yeah, as always, my friend.
I appreciate it. Real quick, just can you also, you can add it to the notes on the bottom on the page, but what's the best way for everybody to contact you?
Just go on my website. It's the 7secretsalesacademy.com. The number 7, you can see it there. I'll type it down here.
Okay, perfect.
But there's a, what happened? Hold on a minute. You still with me, Joe?
Yeah, I'm here.
I lost the screen. Where the heck did you go? Anyway, I don't know what happened. I typed something and lost. Anyway, the 7secretsalesacademy.com. There's a contact sheet there. Would love to chat with anyone who needs help with their sales teams for sure.
It's the number 7.
The number 7. So then the number 7, secretssalesacademy.com.
All right. I'm putting it on there now.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So that way you can have that. Should show up there. All right, good. Hey, I appreciate it, my friend.
Always a good time. Oh, I just found you. There you are.
Good. Whew.
Yeah. So yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, let's do this again and let's keep up the good fight.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, Joe. Have a great weekend.
Have a good one. You too.
Take care.